How can a nation sitting atop the world's fifth largest proven oil reserves, a resource that should be a foundation for prosperity, find itself grappling with persistent economic stagnation? What are the underlying factors that prevent this nation from fully realizing its economic potential? This is Iraq's paradox in 2025, a stark contrast between potential wealth and current reality. After years filled with hope for a brighter future and ambitious rebuilding efforts following periods of conflict, Iraq's economy has stalled, progress has slowed to a crawl, exposing deep structural weaknesses that have been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. These are not just minor setbacks, but fundamental flaws in the economic architecture. The country's over-reliance on oil, a single commodity, and a bloated public sector, characterized by inefficiency and overstaffing, have created a cycle of dependency that's hard to break, a self-perpetuating system that hinders diversification and innovation. When oil prices dip, as they inevitably do in the volatile global market, the entire system falters, revealing just how vulnerable the nation is to external shocks. Revealing a critical lack of diversification, a failure to cultivate other industries and revenue streams, and fragile fiscal foundations, built on the shifting sands of oil revenue. This isn't just about abstract numbers on a spreadsheet. It's a direct challenge to national stability, threatening the very fabric of Iraqi society, and the future prospects of millions of young Iraqis who deserve opportunities and a chance to build a better life. Iraq's dual economy, a tale of two vastly different worlds, an advanced, technologically sophisticated oil sector, and a struggling, underdeveloped non-oil sector, starved of investment and innovation, lies at the very heart of its stagnation, representing a fundamental imbalance that must be addressed. The economic slowdown of 2025 serves as a stark wake-up call, a clear signal that the current path is unsustainable, forcing Iraq to confront long-overdue reforms, changes that have been postponed for far too long, and tough political choices, decisions that will require courage, vision, and a commitment to the long-term well-being of the nation. The world is watching with keen interest as Iraq's next steps will shape not only its own future, determining whether it can finally unlock its vast potential, but also regional stability, influencing the delicate balance of power in the Middle East and global energy markets, impacting the supply and demand dynamics that affect economies worldwide. The year is 2025 and Iraq finds itself grappling with a persistent economic crisis. The bustling cityscapes and once promising financial districts now bear the weight of economic uncertainty. This crisis isn't a sudden occurrence, it's the culmination of deep-seated issues driven by 5 core problems so significant they can be described as the 5 horsemen of its malaise, each contributing to the nation's economic woes. First and perhaps most alarmingly, Iraq's GDP is shrinking, not growing. This signals a stark reversal of fortunes, a worrying trend that indicates a deeper economic downturn. This is especially concerning for a population already weary from decades of hardship, conflict, and instability. The shrinking economy adds another layer of burden to their daily lives. Second, unemployment, especially among the youth demographic, remains alarmingly high, a persistent challenge that threatens social stability and future prosperity. The problem is further compounded by the fact that the public sector, traditionally a major employer, is now unable to absorb the ever-increasing number of new job seekers. Third, the Iraqi government's budget is dangerously dependent on oil revenues, leaving the nation highly exposed to volatile price swings in the global oil market and potential production cuts imposed by international agreements. Fourth, this over-reliance on oil has significantly stunted the growth and development of other crucial economic sectors. Sectors like agriculture, which once held great promise, and manufacturing, essential for a diversified economy, have suffered from neglect and underinvestment. This makes economic diversification, a critical step towards long-term stability and prosperity, seem like a distant and unattainable dream. Fifth, the private sector, the engine of growth in any modern economy, remains largely stagnant in Iraq. It is severely hampered by excessive bureaucracy, pervasive corruption, unreliable and outdated infrastructure, and a lack of strong legal protections for businesses and investments. Without a vibrant and thriving private sector to create jobs and drive innovation, Iraq remains trapped in a cycle of state dependency and persistent economic vulnerability, unable to realize its full potential. These 5 horsemen are not isolated problems. They feed off each other in a complex web of interconnected challenges, further deepening the economic crisis and making the prospect of a sustainable recovery even more difficult to achieve. The result? A vicious cycle of missed opportunities, unrealized potential, and mounting frustration among the Iraqi people. Breaking this debilitating cycle requires urgent, comprehensive, and coordinated action on all fronts, addressing each of these 5 core problems simultaneously. The numbers behind Iraq's slowdown are stark. GDP, once expected to grow, is now projected to contract by 1.5% in 2025, mainly due to oil sector struggles. The non-oil sector is barely growing, failing to offset oil losses. Unemployment hovers at 16%, but for youth, it's over 35%, a demographic time bomb. The government's budget, based on optimistic oil prices, now faces a deficit nearing 8% of GDP. To fill the gap, Iraq is drawing down reserves and borrowing, putting pressure on the dinar and fueling inflation. Inflation is rising, with consumer prices up 5.5%, outpacing wage growth and eroding purchasing power. For ordinary Iraqis, this means higher costs and fewer opportunities, deepening daily struggles. The impact of Iraq's slowdown is visible on the ground. In Basra, a once booming construction sector has stalled as government payments dry up, forcing companies to halt projects and lay off workers. This ripple effect hits suppliers and laborers, swelling the ranks of the unemployed. In banking, private institutions like the Tigris Commercial Bank struggle to support small businesses. Bureaucracy, legal uncertainty, and dominance by state-owned banks stifle lending and innovation. International banking ties are strained by global regulations, further isolating Iraq's private sector. Ambitious loan programs for small businesses are shelved, reflecting the broader challenges facing economic diversification. These stories are repeated across Iraq, illustrating how policy failures translate into real-world pain. The result: stalled growth, lost jobs, and fading hope for a better future. Iraq's economic pain is not just a matter of numbers on a spreadsheet or abstract economic theory, it's a tangible reality felt by everyday Iraqis, impacting their livelihoods, their opportunities, and their future prospects. We need to understand the root causes of this pain to find lasting solutions. It is the direct result of policy choices, or rather a series of policy missteps and systemic failures that have plagued the nation for far too long. These aren't accidental oversights. They are the consequences of deliberate decisions, often driven by short-term gains and political expediency, rather than a commitment to long-term sustainable development. The budget's overwhelming dependence on oil revenue is a critical vulnerability. It's a reliance that has turned Iraq into a hostage of global oil prices, making its economic stability contingent on factors entirely outside its control. This dependence means that OPEC production cuts, designed to stabilize global oil markets, trigger immediate and often devastating fiscal crises at home, leaving the government scrambling to make ends meet and forcing it to make difficult choices that often hurt the most vulnerable segments of society. Ambitious infrastructure projects, vital for long-term growth and development, are launched with great fanfare in good times when oil revenues are flowing freely. But these projects are all too often abandoned when revenues inevitably fall, leaving behind a trail of unfinished buildings, broken promises, and wasted potential. This cycle of boom and bust is not only wasteful but also erodes investor confidence, making it even harder to attract the foreign investment needed to diversify the economy and create sustainable jobs. Rampant corruption and suffocating bureaucracy act as hidden taxes, draining resources and stifling innovation. This environment discourages legitimate investment and rewards only the well-connected, perpetuating a system of cronyism and patronage that undermines fair competition and economic growth. As a result, Iraq consistently ranks near the bottom in global business environment indices, reflecting the significant challenges and obstacles that businesses face in operating within the country. This consistently low ranking sends a clear signal of high risk to potential investors, further deterring much-needed capital and expertise. Successive governments talk a good game about reform, promising to tackle corruption, streamline bureaucracy, and diversify the economy. However, they consistently lack the political will to challenge powerful vested interests that benefit from the status quo. Without a clear long-term vision and a real, unwavering commitment to fundamental change, Iraq remains trapped in a destructive boom-and-bust cycle, unable to break free from its dependence on oil and its vulnerability to external shocks. The result is persistent underdevelopment, a continuous stream of lost economic opportunities, and a population that is increasingly losing faith in the ability of the system to deliver a better future. Until there is a broad consensus for genuine, meaningful reform that addresses the root causes of these problems, the cycle of economic pain and disappointment will inevitably continue. Iraq's future prosperity and stability depend on its ability to break free from these self-imposed constraints and embrace a new path towards sustainable and inclusive development. Iraq's path to recovery is tough but possible, if it embraces real reform. First, fiscal stability is key. Smarter, more transparent management of public finances and a broader non-oil tax base. Digital systems can help track transactions and reduce evasion, boosting non-oil revenues. Second, the private sector must be empowered through radical simplification of business procedures and stronger legal protections. Privatizing or restructuring state-owned enterprises can end their drain on public finances. Third, Iraq must invest in human capital, reforming education to match market needs, and using public-private partnerships to fund infrastructure. Solving chronic issues like electricity shortages will unlock growth. Fighting corruption is non-negotiable. Independent oversight, digital procurement, and transparent payments are essential. Restoring public trust and attracting investment depend on these reforms. Only with sustained, credible action can Iraq build a resilient, inclusive economy. Iraq's economic fate has global consequences. As a major oil producer, its stability affects energy markets worldwide. Prolonged crisis risks social unrest and supply disruptions, making Iraq's recovery a strategic priority for many nations. The international community must support credible reforms and stay engaged. For investors, Iraq remains a high-potential but challenging frontier. Watch for real signs of change. Most importantly, Iraq's youth deserve a future of opportunity, not frustration. Economic failure risks renewed conflict. Success could anchor peace and democracy. The world has a stake in Iraq's journey from oil dependency to sustainable prosperity. The story isn't over. What happens next matters to us all. For more data-driven insights and global market breakdowns, subscribe and turn on notifications. Stay informed, stay ahead. This is Economics FX, where clarity meets strategy. Until next time, trade smart.